Hello viewers, welcome to Newsweek South Asia, where we will provide you fresh insights into South Asia's geopolitical, strategic and security situation. Let's take a look at the headlines first. Targeted attack on LET leader in Pakistan highlights deepening internal rivalries. From London to Geneva, Baloch movement amplifies rights concerns. And questions rise over controlled polls in Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan. In Pakistan, a steady pattern of targeted attacks is increasingly pointing toward internal rivalries rather than external threats. Lashkar-e-Taiba co-founder Amir Hamza has been critically injured after being shot by unidentified gunmen in Lahore, marking yet another strike in what experts describe as a deepening cycle of infighting. These recurring attacks, often carried out in broad daylight and in major urban centers, suggest that the threat is now emanating from within. Factional splits, competing networks, and leadership struggles appear to be driving a wave of violence among groups that once cooperated in coordination. Take a look.
A series of targeted shootings by unidentified attackers is drawing attention in Pakistan, with a clear pattern beginning to emerge. These attacks, often carried out in public spaces, have repeatedly targeted individuals linked to proscribed organizations, suggesting a deeper internal churn. In the latest incident, two unknown gunmen opened fire on Lashkar-e-Taiba co-founder Amir Hamza outside a television station in Lahore on April 16. The 67-year-old sustained critical injuries and was rushed to hospital. This is the second attempt on his life within a year. Experts say the consistency of these attacks targeting specific individuals within Pakistan and executed by unknown gunmen points towards an ongoing internal struggle rather than external operations. Factional divides, competing networks, and long-standing rivalries are believed to be driving this violence.
Well, to hear that one of the other leaders of Lashkar-e-Taiba has been shot dead, that sort of a statement and that sort of a killing does not surprise anybody. There is evidence from every side. There are enemies against Lashkar-e-Taiba. Which intelligence agency does it? The blame goes to many intelligence agencies and the local infighting in Pakistan. So another Lashkar-e-Taiba leader being killed comes as no surprise to the world.
Since 2020, several Pakistan-based terrorists were killed in targeted shootings across cities such as Lahore, Karachi, Rawalpindi and Peshawar. Many of these attacks followed a similar pattern. Unidentified gunmen, often on motorcycles, carried out close-range shootings and escaped without being identified. Just last month, Muhammad Tahir Anwar, the elder brother of Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Maulana Masood Azhar, died in Pakistan under what it was described as mysterious circumstances. He was known to play a key operational role within the outfit. Earlier in March last year, Lashkar-e-Taiba operative Abu Qatal, also known as Qatal Sindhi, was shot dead in Pakistan's Jhelum Sindh region. He was considered a close aide of Hafiz Saeed and was linked to the 2024 Riyasi attack in Jammu and Kashmir.
Abu Qatal was the mastermind of attack on ship Khodi Yatris on, I think, 9th June when the Honorable Prime Minister was taking oath. If you recall him, only at that moment when swearing in was going on, he attacked that bus, and I think 12 Yatris got killed and many were injured. So Abu Qatil, not only in this attack, he was involved in Butta Doria, VDC attack, many other attacks in Rajouri Poonch area, and he was actually engineering infiltration from Kotli launching pad across Rajouri Poonch. In fact, whatever you saw in Rajouri Poonch as the escalation last year was because this man was very active. Good that cleaning up is taking place of such rogue elements, and maybe Pakistan also gets relief from such people.
The recurring pattern of these assassinations underscores a dangerous reality. Terror outfits nurtured on Pakistani soil are now turning on each other. What was once projected as a coordinated network is increasingly fracturing under pressure from internal distrust, leadership rivalries, and competition for control. For Pakistan, this wave of targeted killings raises serious questions about its ability or willingness to rein in groups that have long operated with impunity. The persistence of such attacks in major cities not only exposes glaring security lapses but also reflects the blowback of a policy that has for years blurred the line between state strategy and militant activity. As these groups implode from within, the violence is no longer confined to border regions. It is unfolding in the heart of Pakistan itself, revealing a deepening crisis that the state can no longer deflect or deny.
Moving on, protests by the Baloch National Movement are gaining global momentum, with demonstrations now spanning London, Busan and Geneva. Activists allege enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings and a continued crackdown on dissent in Balochistan. Voices from the movement are urging the United Nations and world powers to take notice and act. As these protests grow louder on international platforms, serious questions are being raised about human rights, media freedom and accountability in Pakistan.
These visuals from the streets of London show protesters holding banners and placards outside 10 Downing Street. The protest was led by the UK chapter of the Baloch National Movement. It is a part of an online global campaign aimed at drawing international attention to the situation in Balochistan. Protesters claim that Balochistan was forcibly annexed on March 27, 1948, and since then the region has witnessed continued repression and alleged state-led abuses.
Today, we gather here to demand justice, to demand an end of Balochistan's occupations by Pakistan. On 27th March 1948, Balochistan was occupied by Pakistan. Since then, Pakistani state has been committing systematic genocide of Baloch nations. Baloch National Movement's Human Rights Department PANG last year documented 1,300 cases of enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings of Baloch peoples. So, we demand from the United Nations, UK governments, and United Nations Human Rights Councils our rights. It is our rights. It's not privilege. Every nation has to decide its own future. We demand our independence.
During the protest, Baloch activists highlighted cases of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and what they described as systematic human rights violations. They also urged the international community, including the United Nations and the United Kingdom, to take immediate notice and intervene.
Pakistan's also abducting the women, as you can see in the picture behind me, abducting the women, torturing them, and killing the Baloch nation's leaders. So we demand our freedoms and justice. And thank you for coming here and listening to us. And we hope that you guys support our freedom struggles.
As the movement gathers momentum across continents, similar voices are being echoed beyond Europe. In South Korea's Busan, supporters of the Baloch National Movement also staged a protest as a part of the same global campaign, raising concerns over human rights violations and calling for justice, freedom, and international intervention. The issue has also been amplified at global diplomatic platforms. During the BNM's 11th International Conference in Geneva, held alongside the 61st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, UK-based journalist Saqlain Imam highlighted what he described as a worsening environment for press freedom in Pakistan.
We are not allowed to report anything. There's a complete media blackout. I'm talking of today, and it is especially it has gone worse since the passing of PICA Act, Pakistan Electronic Crimes Act, 2016, I think. So since then, there's no fair reporting, because either you may be lifted, which is in Pakistan called Utha Liya, or you are killed. Just last year, Abdul Latif Baloch, he was killed, and there's no, actually legal action against his murderers. And he's not the only one. There are many other journalists who have been killed. Just for fair reporting, they were killed. And no, not a single killer was ever arrested by any government of Pakistan's authority, by Balochistan authority.
From London to Busan and Geneva, the Baloch movement is increasingly gaining international visibility. Protesters allege that Pakistan continues to suppress voices in Balochistan and target those who speak out. The question remains, will the international community take note of these allegations, or will the voices from Balochistan continue to go unheard?
Pakistan's worsening energy crisis is now hitting its economy at the grassroots. In the capital Islamabad, widespread power cuts triggered by an LNG shortage have forced restaurants to shut operations, slashing incomes and pushing workers into distress. The situation has also exposed serious gaps in energy planning and crisis management by the government. Take a look.
In Pakistan's capital Islamabad, the impact of this deepening crisis is playing out on the streets. Restaurants and small businesses have been pushed to the brink as relentless power cuts bring operations to a halt. Dark kitchens, empty dining spaces, and idle workers have become the new normal. With electricity failing almost every hour, business owners say survival itself is now a challenge. The immediate trigger has been a severe LNG shortage after Qatar halted supplies under force majeure. But the larger issue lies in Pakistan's chronic dependence on imported fuel and the absence of any effective contingency planning. With no reliable backup, authorities have turned to expensive furnace oil-based power, further exposing the fragile state of the country's energy management.
बहुत ज़्यादा फर्क पड़ा है, लोड शेडिंग की वजह से पड़ा है, ठीक है। लोड शेडिंग की वजह से हर घंटे के बाद बिजली जा रही है, जबकि ये कह रहे थे कि इतनी बिजली नहीं जाएगी। बिजली हर घंटे के बाद जा रही है। अब गेस्ट का आना बिल्कुल बंद हो गया है। जो मज़दूर है उसको आधी दिहाड़ी दी जा रही है, ठीक है, उसके साथ भी ज़्यादती है। और उसके बाद 10 बजे लोड शेडिंग अपना लॉकडाउन लगता है। अगर 5 मिनट 10 मिनट भी लेट हो जाए, होटल सील कर देते हैं। और लॉकडाउन की वजह से जितने भी बिजनेसमैन हैं, चाहे वो होटलियर है, कोई कंपनीज है या कोई और कंपनी है, तो उसमें से स्टाफ को शार्ट किया जा रहा है। गरीब लोगों का पेट काटा जा रहा है। लिहाजा हुकूमत से रिक्वेस्ट है कि ये हमारे साथ ज़्यादती ना करें, हमें रिलीफ दें, ठीक है, लॉकडाउन का भी रिलीफ दें और लोड शेडिंग का भी रिलीफ दें।
As businesses struggle to stay afloat, the worst impact is being felt by daily wage workers, whose incomes depend entirely on daily customer flow. With rising inflation and repeated outages, earning a basic livelihood is becoming nearly impossible. Many say they are now trapped between economic hardship and administrative restrictions with no relief in sight.
अब इतनी महंगाई हो गई है, एक तो लोड शेडिंग, दूसरे नंबर पे लॉकडाउन, एक महंगाई, एक कस्टमर आ भी नहीं रहा। आपके सामने है, टेबल से कुर्सी सारा कुछ खाली है। अब ये क्या चलेगा निज़ाम? कोई निज़ाम नहीं चल रहा हमारा। हम गरीब बंदे हैं, कहाँ से इतना सफ़र करके आ रहे हैं बच्चों के लिए रोज़ी कमाने के लिए। हमारी इसी हुकूमत से अपील है कि हमें जो है ना मजदूर लोगों के साथ तावन किया जाए।
The government, however, has attributed the crisis largely to external factors, pointing to disruptions in global energy supplies.
2500 मेगावाट का जो शॉर्टफॉल गैस की पावर के अंदर हुआ वो इसलिए हुआ क्योंकि बाहर से गैस नहीं आ रही। ईरान की जो जंग अमेरिका के साथ लगी हुई है और स्ट्रेट ऑफ हॉर्मूज के अंदर जो इशू है उसकी वजह से हमें गैस मौसूल नहीं हो रही और कतर ने फोर्स मेजोर किया हुआ है, वो आपके और आवाम के इल्म में है।
Even as the government talk about alternative fuel arrangements, the scale of the deficit continues to grow, with little immediate relief for businesses or households.
वो 3200 मेगावाट जो पन बिजली से बनती थी वो अब नीचे होके 1671 मेगावाट पे पहुंच चुकी है। यानी मंगला और ये तरबेला से जो पानी रिलीज ना होने की वजह से बिजली के अंदर जो कमी पिछले 15 दिन में रही है वो तकरीबन 1700 मेगावाट रही है। यानी तो हमारा तकरीबन शॉर्टफॉल जो है मिला के 2500 मेगावाट एलएनजी का हमारा जी शॉर्टफॉल आया। बाहर से ईंधन नहीं आ रहा, मेरे प्लांट्स बिजली नहीं बना सक रहे और 1530 मेगावाट का शॉर्टफॉल हमें पन बिजली न पैदा होने की वजह से हुआ।
With outages intensifying and livelihoods at stake, Pakistan's power crisis is no longer just an energy issue. It is rapidly becoming a full-blown economic and governance challenge.
Fresh allegations have surfaced over the electoral process in Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, with claims of manipulation, delays and lack of a fixed legal framework. Political activist Sengay Sering has accused Pakistan's establishment of influencing outcomes through interim setups and controlled governance. A report.
In Pakistan's illegally occupied regions, including Gilgit-Baltistan, democratic rights and constitutional safeguards continue to be absent. Despite repeated claims by Islamabad of development and representation, activists and local voices have consistently pointed to systemic political marginalization, lack of legal clarity, and tight control by the military establishment. The region still does not enjoy full constitutional status within Pakistan, and key decisions are often dictated from the center, raising serious concerns over governance and autonomy. Against this backdrop, political activist Sengay Sering has alleged serious irregularities in the electoral process in Pakistan-occupied Gilgit-Baltistan, claiming that elections are not conducted under any fixed legal framework.
गिलगित बल्तिस्तान में इलेक्शन किसी आईनी कानून के हिसाब से तो होते नहीं हैं। यहाँ पर इलेक्शन जो हैं मुख्तलिफ बहानों से उनको टाला जाता है। एक इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट लाई जाती है जो उनके अपने मनपसंद लोग होते हैं, आईएसआई के अप्रूव्ड लोग होते हैं। ऐसे लोगों के हाथ में फिर कई महीनों तक जो है निज़ाम रहता है। कभी बहाना ये होता है कि जी आपके मौसम ख़राब है इसलिए हम इस महीने में इलेक्शन नहीं करा सकते। कभी ये कहते हैं कि जी मुल्क के हालात ठीक नहीं हैं, ईरान की जंग हो रही है और दूसरे मसाइल हैं, इस वजह से हम इलेक्शन नहीं करा सकते।
Such allegations point to a broader pattern where electoral timelines and administrative mechanisms are allegedly used as tools to shape political outcomes. Extended gaps created through interim arrangements raise concerns over the misuse of state machinery to influence public opinion and weaken independent political participation.
आईएसआई क्या करती है कि वो जो 5-6 महीने के बीच में गैप देती है एक इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट के थ्रू, इसमें फिर वो अपनी मैनिपुलेशन करती है, लोगों के साथ साजबाज करती है, लोगों के साथ गठजोड़ करती है ताकि एग्जैक्टली ऐसे कैंडिडेट को जिताया जा सके जो उनकी पॉलिसीज को आगे लाते हैं। तो ये जो बीच में एक टाइम दिया जाता है इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट के थ्रू, ये आईएसआई इसी मकसद से देती है ताकि इलेक्शन में अपनी मर्जी के लोग आगे लाए जा सकें। तो ये क्लियरली शो करता है कि यहाँ फेयर इलेक्शन नहीं होते, मैनिपुलेटेड इलेक्शन होते हैं।
There are also growing concerns that dissenting voices and candidates who do not align with the establishment face systemic pressure, including legal and administrative action.
वक्त के साथ साथ आप देखेंगे लोगों के ऊपर शेड्यूल 4 जो है, शेड्यूल 4 है, उसके केसेस बनना शुरू हो जाएंगे। बहुत से कैंडिडेट उस तरीके से फारिग हो जाएंगे। तो ये जो मैनिपुलेशन है ये कई महीने तक जारी रहती है और इसलिए एक इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट लाई जाती है ताकि आईएसआई को आसानी हो अपने मर्जी के लोगों को वहाँ इलेक्शन वो जितवा सकें।
As the region heads towards the June 7 elections, these concerns once again bring into focus Pakistan's approach to governance in the occupied territories. Critics maintain that continued interference, lack of institutional autonomy, and reliance on controlled political setups reflect a deeper failure to uphold democratic norm.
And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We will be back next week with more news, views, and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@anin.com. This is Akansha Parimu signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.